And let me share my screen. Okay, thumbs up quickly if you can see the screen. Okay, great. So we're carrying on with partnerships. Test 2 is on Saturday. I'll share the test notice on the WhatsApp group directly after class. I've just finished preparing it. It's an online test. It covers up to the end of Unit 13, so it includes this week's work as well. So we're looking at partnerships. We've learned that in order for there to be a valid partnership, there must be a contract between 2 to 20 people, which includes the 3 essential elements: contribution, joint business, and profit sharing. Now, once you have a partnership, there are certain natural legal consequences. That will always apply unless expressly excluded. Now, this concept, this idea shouldn't be strange or new or anything to you. We did purchase and sale. We learned once you have a contract of purchase and sale, there are certain legal consequences that arise automatically because it is purchase and sale. Like, for example, guarantee against eviction, guarantee warranty against latent defects, etc., etc., etc. Lease agreement, same thing. Once you have a lease agreement, there are certain natural consequences. You also describe these as the duties of the parties. Now, whereas purchase and sale, you have two different parties. You have a purchaser and a seller. Lease agreement, you have the lessor and the lessee. Partnerships, you have partners. So these duties apply equally to all the parties. So for every right, they apply for every right. So if you have as a partner a duty of good faith, you also have the right that to expect of your other partners to practice good faith. Just quickly, if I'm referring to the rights and duties of partners, I'm speaking about the common law rights and duties. Those that arise naturally because it is a partnership agreement. Of course, every partnership agreement can also have tailor-made duties for specific partners. So and so will do A, so and so will do B. That's not what I'm referring to in this unit. I'm referring to these common law duties that apply equally to all partners unless expressly excluded. Now, the most important, I want to say, duty is the duty of good faith. Duty of good faith, also known as the fiduciary duty. Now, the duty of good faith, the fiduciary duty, is not a duty which is unique to partnerships. It is a duty which anybody that is in charge of property belonging to somebody else has in the manner that they handle the duty. Remember, we saw last week that there is a partnership fund, which during existence of the, I didn't put this in here, during the existence of the partnership fund belongs to all parties. So it doesn't belong to a particular partner, but they all have the right to deal with the partnership fund. When dealing it, they're dealing with something that belongs to somebody else, and they have to exercise utmost good faith. And I've just said it, not just good faith, utmost. Good faith, the highest level. So not just a little bit of good faith, itsy bitsy good faith, absolute, utter good faith. And much as I have just said that it will always apply unless expressly excluded, you cannot you can change some of the other duties, exclude some of the other duties, but you cannot ever exclude this duty in a partnership agreement. You cannot contract that, oh, you don't have to act in good faith. You've got to, starting now, grasp the fiduciary duty, the duty of good faith. As I said, it doesn't only apply to partners in a partnership, it applies also to company directors and to members of a close corporation. Next semester, when we do company law, when I get to the duties of directors, I'm going to say they have a duty of good faith, and I'm going to expect of you to know exactly what I'm talking about. So what is this duty of good faith? Lots of descriptions have been given about the duty of good faith. In essence, what it boils down to is that partners must promote the business of the partnership unselfishly and not personally profit. at the expense of the partnership. So partnership business that falls within the scope of the business of the partnership.
So,
Business that falls within the scope of the business of the partnership. A partner cannot keep that for themselves. Let's say Asser, Narisha, and Queen enter into a partnership to do accounting work. They open up an office of accountants. If they are in a business doing, I'm not saying the duty of good faith does not mean you may not have any other business interests outside the partnership, as long as it doesn't interfere with the business of the partnership. So if Asser, Narisha, and Queen are practicing as partners, as accountants, Asser can have a farm that he goes to over the weekends. Nothing wrong with that. But Queen cannot take in private clients and do their books, do their bookkeeping, do their accounting as a sideline job, because that would be keeping a potential client away from the partnership. The term that is mostly used for this is they must avoid at all costs a conflict of interests. So it's not actually difficult to understand. You must avoid a conflict of interest, sacrifice, if need be, sacrifice your own potential benefits to the advantage of the partnership. Cannot carry out business in competition. As I say, doesn't mean you have to spend every waking moment in the business of the partnership. You can have outside interests as long as it is not in competition. Competition can also be if it's taking your time away from the business, but you still expecting an equal share of the profit, whereas your partners are doing all the work. Information obtained as a partner may not be used for your own benefit. So if you get information, let's say a current client shares information about you, about a future deal or something, you cannot then keep that information to yourself and pursue this lucrative deal for your own pocket. You have to share it with your partners. And then, of course, you must render accounts. Keep your partners informed at all times of what you are doing. Now, the law takes the duty of good faith very, very seriously. As I said, it is utmost good faith. If there's a breach of good faith, it can lead the dissolution of the partnership. So it can become the end of things. There can also potentially be a claim for damages. If a partnership business suffered damage as a result of a partner's breach of good faith, they will have a claim for these damages. But it goes further than this. It can also have a potential claim for lost profits. Benefits derived, profits made. In breach of this duty. So what that boils down to is if Queen was doing her bookkeeping, accounting for her own private clients in competition with their accounting partnership, the other partners, Asser and Narisha, can actually institute a claim against her for the profits that she earned. And the courts are very serious about this. There's a very well-known court case. We get back to it again when we do duties, directors' duties, because it actually refers to company directors, not partners, but the principle is the same. There was a man who was the managing director of a company, and this company wanted to acquire another business. Shareholders of the other, and the managing director was put in charge of the negotiations. The other company, the one that they wanted to acquire, made it very clear to this managing director that under no circumstances will they do business with his original company, with his company. For other reasons, they don't like the shareholders, they've got some conflicts there, had some beef previously. They would not enter any deal with Company A. They also said to Mr. Managing Director that they have nothing against him personally, and they would do business with him personally if he was not attached, if he was not part of Company A. He then subsequently resigned as a director, as managing director from Company A, and took up this new business deal with Company B that he had been trying to acquire for Company A. And when the company discovered this, they took him to court. The court found he was in breach of his fiduciary duty. And Company A did not suffer damages. They did not lose money, because Company B made it very clear that they did not intend having any business dealings with him. So they didn't lose money. He didn't take money away from Company A, but he made money out of this contact that he got, this knowledge that he got through Company A, and the court ordered that whatever profit he made, he had to pay over to Company A. That is how serious they courts take this duty of good faith. So not only a claim for damages, which is your normal contractual damages that you could claim if there's a breach of this duty, but also a claim for benefits derived, profits made. As you could have gathered now from the story that I told, this duty starts the moment you start negotiating. Future partners. So even before they formalize the agreement, even before the partnership has officially started, the moment they start negotiating, this duty of good faith arises. So if Nerisha, or let's see other people, Sebastian, Pamwe, and Taimi are in partnership negotiations to start a business, and Pamwe then decides, no, I'm not going to do business with Sebastian and Taimi anymore. I'm going to keep this opportunity for myself and run with it. That would already be a breach of good faith. It also does not end the moment the partnership comes to an end. It continues. Even after the partnership has dissolved. So if, who were my friends here, Sebastian, Pamwe, and Taimi, are already in a partnership, and then Sebastian hears about a lucrative business deal, which he prefers to keep with himself and not share with his partners, but he knows all about duty of good faith, blah, blah, blah. So he decides to resign from the partnership, to dissolve the partnership, so that he's no longer partners with Pamwe and Taimi in order to exploit this new business idea. He will still be in breach of his fiduciary duty to them, and they can still claim the profits made. The sentence that's used here in the notes is a partner cannot dissolve the partnership with the intention of overreaching his partners and keep the benefits. So this duty of good faith touches every aspect of being in a partnership. It is all encompassing. It is very important. Questions about good faith? No questions. Okay, so the next duty that we look at is the duty of reasonable care. Now, the first thing I need to warn you about, and so many students make this mistake, and I promise you I will deduct many, many marks. The duty of good faith and the duty of reasonable care, also known as the duty of care and skill, are two distinctly separate duties. Common mistake made by students is you throw these two duties together and you start writing the rubbish like the fiduciary duty of care and skill. This is nonsense. It is wrong. If in a test question I see the words fiduciary duty of care and skill, I will give you 0 for I won't just deduct 1 mark. I will give you 0 for the entire question. Your fiduciary duty is one duty, the duty of utmost good faith. Then you have a separate duty, the duty of reasonable care and skill. So you can already see the difference there. The one is utmost good faith. The other one, reasonable, so-so. So the way it's measured is already different. Now, the duty of care and skill relates to the management of partnership affairs, or partnership property. Now, in order to be a partner in a business, there are no special skills required, generally speaking. Obviously, depending on the type of partnership. If it's a partnership practicing as accountants, then you will expect or require partners to have an accounting qualification. But a partnership that is running a shoe shop, no specific special skills are required. Unless you have undertaken, if when entering into this partnership, you profess to have certain skills, then obviously it is expected that your partners can expect of you to have those skills to exercise them properly. If the partnership suffers damage due to the negligence, so not exercising very bad spelling there, not exercising care and skill is regarded as negligence. And if there's negligence involved, there will be the other partners on behalf of the partnership can claim damages. So same as the duty of good faith. If the partnership suffers damages as a result of a breach of this duty, this can be claimed by the other partners on behalf of the partnership. Obviously, they need to prove it. You already know the requirements for proving damages. So they actually have to prove that they suffered damages. But if they can't prove their damages, there is no further claim. Whereas with the duty of good faith, you can claim for benefits, even if there was no actual damage suffered. Now, how do you measure for negligence? What is the standard required? Standard that is required is that a partner must manage partnership affairs in the same way as he will manage his own affairs. This is not particularly strict. There's no expertise required. You don't have to be an expert. Whereas, once again, to reiterate, fiduciary duty, absolute utmost good faith. Do not ever write to me about a fiduciary duty of care and skill. Questions? You're quiet. Okay, next duty. The duty to carry on the business of the partnership. That's actually pretty self-explanatory, fairly obvious. Partnership is an agreement whereby persons contribute to a joint business with the aim of making and sharing a profit. So you must actually do this. You must contribute. Must be paid over, made available. If your contribution is labor, you must actually pitch up for work. So you don't only enter into a partnership with the intention of making a business. The business must actually commence. And partners must be involved. In general, partners are not entitled to compensation for their contributions. Because your compensation lies in profit sharing. But remember these duties, as I said here, as I started off, These are natural consequences that will always apply unless expressly excluded. So partners are welcome. So the general rule is you don't get compensated for your contribution. You don't get paid for doing the work, because at the end of the day, you're going to get your share of profit sharing. This can, of course, be changed. And in the agreement, partners are absolutely free to determine payment of a salary. Even DIF doesn't have to be the same depending on whatever their decision is. They can come to a different arrangement. For if a partner pays extra tasks or partnership expenses from their own pocket, they can claim compensation. So despite what I've just said about generally compensation is not payable for services rendered, for contributions and services rendered, don't let this put you off entering into a partnership on the basis of, oh, but I'm never going to be paid. Firstly, the intention is that if you're a partner, you will share in the partnership, in the profit, but also partners are free to make alternative arrangements with regard to payment of salaries, etc., etc. Next one. Okay, let's do one more before we end. Sharing in profits and losses. It is a right of partners to share in the profits and losses. It is also a duty of partners to make sure that profits are shared and losses are shared. So each partner is entitled to a share in the net profits. They are also obliged to share in the net losses. There can be some variations on that if it is an extraordinary partnership. Remember, we did extraordinary partnerships at the end of last week's class, where extraordinary partners are not liable to third parties. Commandeitarian partners, specifically, their share of the losses is limited. Now, how is profit sharing done? Who gets how much? There are certain rules which apply to partnerships in this regard. In the first instance, a partnership is an agreement. Partnership is an agreement. And partners are free to agree on a profit sharing ratio. And it's nobody's business outside the partnership to comment on this. If Narisha and Ruan enter into a partnership and Narisha is contributing $100,000 and Ruan contributes $100. So Narisha contributes 100,000, Ruan contributes 100. They both work equally. And they decide to share the profits equally. Then anybody to say, but that's not fair. They agreed upon it. Remember, a partnership is a business agreement. This is not an employment agreement where parties are not always on equal footing. Employment law, you're desperate for a job, you accept whatever that's offered. Narisha and Ruan entered into this agreement on equal footing. And if they agreed that this would be the contributions, Narisha would be contributing a whole lot more, but they will share the profits equally, or even Ruan will get the biggest part of the profits, as long as Narisha still gets something. That is their agreement. That is what will apply. The fact that Taimi and Francina think, but this is terribly unfair to Narisha, it's none of their business. So profits are shared then firstly accordance to the partners' agreement. Now, if they did not agree, if there is no agreement, then there are general rules that apply. Namely that in the first instance, profits are shared in accordance to, in proportion to the value of contribution. So the partner that contributed more will get a bigger share of the profits. If the value cannot be determined, so if one partner has contributed property, but the other partner is contributing labor, you can't necessarily put a price on the labor. If the value cannot be ascertained and compared, they will share equally. Just a hint here, a warning. If I'm asking you a test question about how profits are shared, you need to list this in sequence. Let me not use bullet points here. Let's number them. So it's firstly in accordance to the agreement. Secondly, in proportion to the value of the contribution. And thirdly, if the contribution cannot be determined, they share equally. If you answer the question and say they share equally or according to the value of their contribution, I will penalize you. They share in proportion to the value of the contribution or equally. You will first look, can you determine the value of the contribution? And if not, you will fall back on sharing equally. So how are losses shared? There are also rules that apply with the sharing of losses. First rule there is in accordance with the agreement. The sharing of profits and the sharing of losses does not have to be the same. Narisha and Ruan can agree that Ruan will get 90% of the profits and Narisha only 10%. But if there are losses to be paid, that they will each pay 50%. Once again, can't say, but that's unfair. It was their decision. So it does not have to be the sharing of losses, not have to be as profit sharing. If there is no agreement regarding sharing of losses, so if this was never specifically addressed, you fall back on the default rules, namely in the same manner as profit is shared. How is profit shared? Like that. So you'll firstly look, is there an agreement specifically with regard to the sharing of losses? If there isn't, then you default to the manner in which profit is shared and the same rules apply. Is there an agreement with regard to profit sharing? Then if somebody gets 50% of the profit, they share 50% of the losses. If there's no agreement with regard to sharing of profits, losses shared in proportion to the value of the contribution. If you cannot determine this, they are shared equally. You can see that this can have a very I'm going to use the word unfair now, an unfair effect in certain circumstances. If you start sharing losses in proportion to the value of the contribution, because that will have the effect that the person who contributed the most, then they've already contributed the most, but now they have to pay the largest portion of the losses. So don't leave these things open. Make sure that when you enter into a partnership, this is properly negotiated. Any questions? No further questions? I will see you then on Thursday evening. Thank you. Bye.
Bye, Miss.
Have a good evening.